The views and opinions expressed are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of KTOO Public Media. This program may contain discussions that include terminology or perspectives that reflect different time periods, cultural contexts, or viewpoints that may not align with contemporary standards or expectations.
It's been something that I've struck out on my own and tried to achieve, but nobody's ever said no, like I said, so I just kept going.
The U.S. Army used the Annette Airfield to service and fuel cargo transport planes carrying men and supplies to defend the Aleutians against the Japanese. The defense of the airfield and much of southeast Alaska was taken on by the Royal Canadian Air Force.
It's exciting. Look at it. I fly big airplanes too, but this is a lot more exciting. I can do aerobatics and keep my feet on the ground, you know.
Greetings and welcome again to Rain Country, the weekly television journal of the people, places, and activities that make up life in Southeast Alaska. I'm Scott Foster. Regardless of where we live in Southeast, we all share one trip in common, and that's the trip to the local airport. Now that's not surprising because flying is only one of two ways we have of getting from place to place. One of the most common sights associated with flying in Southeast is the blue happy face on the tail fin of Alaska Airlines planes. The airline has hired 450 pilots to fly those planes. Of that number, 12 are women. Now that's the highest ratio of male to females of any U.S. airlines. Karen Griffen is an Alaska Airlines captain, the first woman captain on Alaska Airlines.
Alaska Airlines Flight 62, mid-service Pacifica, Ketchikan, Seattle, and Dothan. All passengers.
I want people to think that, have confidence that the airline knows they've hired qualified people and that they've trained them. They're not just doing it because I'm a woman.
How difficult is it being a female and a captain on a major commercial airline?
Well, it's not as tough as I thought it would be. The work is pretty much on your shoulders, and the effort is on your shoulders. If you can cut it and do the same things that are required of the fellas, there's not anything they can say, male or female, derogatory or discriminatory. I've never had any problems. Nobody's ever told me no, that I couldn't do something. It meant a lot of studying if I could meet the minimum requirements and meet the tests required of me on the airplane, and that was all they could expect. That was all they could ask for from me. So I haven't gotten any special treatment.
Do you know how many women captains there are on various airlines in the United States?
There are approximately 25 now.
If there are something like 25 female captains, how many male captains are there?
Oh, maybe 12,000. Quite a few.
So you're in kind of an exclusive group.
Right now, it'll change. It's getting better.
Do you feel like you're kind of in the forefront of like a women's lib movement in an industry that had been male-dominated? Do you have a feeling like that with your job?
No, this is a personal interest. I've never had any interest in feminism or the Gloria Steinem movement or any of that. It's been something that I've struck out on my own and tried to achieve, and nobody's ever said no, like I said, so I just kept going. But it's been my own desire, and come to find out there are several other women that have the same interest.
Did you think the chances of you ending up a captain were a real long shot?
This soon. Yeah, I'm 31 years old, so for someone this young in an airline, especially one this large, is pretty unique. But the economy is such that people are able to move in the positions, and this company in particular is doing a lot of expanding. So that position opened up for me by seniority sooner than I expected. I don't think it's unusual that women will become captains. If airlines are going to hire women, they're going to hire captains.
Captain Karen Griffen has been in aviation for 12 years, the last 5 at Alaska Airlines. She became interested in flying while still in her teens in Boulder, Colorado. While working her way up through the seniority system at Alaska Airlines, Griffen recalls a few situations. One was while working as a flight engineer. One responsibility of that position is dealing with flight attendant problems.
And there were 2 gentlemen, businessmen obviously, that had some kind of argument. They'd been drinking quite a bit, and they decided that they were going to get physical about it, and they stood up in the aisles, and boy, everybody just panicked. And then the flight attendants called and said, "Send somebody back, we need help. You better bring the captain back." Well, this captain said, "That's your job, you go back and take care of it." So I put my hat on and my coat on and threw my shoulders back as far as I could and walked on my toes and went back, and just the sight of the uniform and the hat was enough, and it quelled their anger, and they just kind of, plus I'm 5'10" tall. I was taller than both of them, and that stopped them dead in their tracks, and I didn't have to say anything, all I had to do was look.
Well, is it more difficult for you as a captain in the winter than when you're flying or landing than it is in the summer?
No, there's just more things to think about, just different things to think about. You try to be aware of the, like say, the runway conditions and what kind of storms are in the area, and piece it together and figure out how you're going to treat it. And if it's questionable at all, then we just don't do it. And that's my decision as a captain, and that's what has been judged by our instructors, as being qualified captain decision-making. If you decide the flight is not safe, then you don't do that approach, or you wait for the weather to improve, or wait for daylight, or whatever.
Is that a tough call to make? Obviously, you're going to be inconveniencing all the passengers, everybody waiting, and it have a financial impact on the airlines if you can't land?
No, you don't worry about that. Safety is number one when you're flying the actual aircraft. If, nice days and you've got everything's going pretty smooth and all that, you don't have a lot of weather problems, then you worry about what's your fuel burn, how you could help the company save money. But primarily, you're worried about safety and concern for making it as smooth as you can. Like I say, if there is any doubt, if the runway is questionable, if you can't get somebody down there reliable to tell you what your conditions are, then you just don't go down there. It's real simple.
With all the stuff we read in the newspaper on international terrorism and hijackings, does that thought enter your mind when you read about it, and knowing that you're flying or you're captain of a plane?
It does. We are very cognizant of the cases that have been reported. We do a lot of reading on our own. I don't think about it on a daily basis, but I run through every once in a while in my mind, maybe a little routine I might try to go through, but every case has been different as they've proven, so it's something you kind of have to wait for it to happen and then treat it accordingly.
The 31-year-old Alaska Airlines captain wants to retire with the company at age 60. She cites good pay, good benefits, and flying 85 hours a month as just some of the attractions.
I don't know if I could ever go to work 8 to 5 either. That seems like that would be kind of monotonous to me. But depends on the job, too. I love my job.
So if you're going to be flying in there and you want to find out what your area is,
These students are participating in ground school class offered by Ketchikan Community College. They're learning about aerodynamics, navigation, weather conditions, safety, and all the fundamentals of flying. They're pursuing their dream, to fly.
My name is Rosie Arnson, and I grew up in Ketchikan. And my first recollection of flying was landing in a PBY or a Grumman Goose every time we'd go anywhere. And I always chose to sit up with the pilot and learned a lot and wondered what he was doing.
My name is Ed Johnson, and I'm a construction manager. The reason I'm taking this class is because I've always had interest in aviation, and it'll have some use in my work.
My name is Nina Erickson. I'm very curious about airplanes and helicopters. I really enjoy flying, and I really like to make a career of it.
My name is Mike Haddix. I'm a fisheries biologist for the Department of Fish and Game. And I've just spent lots and lots of time in small airplanes over the last 12 years or so, and finally decided I just learned to fly myself. It's a good way to get from one place to another here.
My name is John Crossy, and I work for the Forest Service in the Aviation Safety Department. And my job is I fly around with a helicopter and a pilot every day, and I just wanted to further my knowledge in the aviation field.
What this is really about is getting a background on the ground before you begin to learn how to fly and the techniques. It really in two phases. Is you get the stuff on the ground, and then you can go on into the air and be a little bit more comfortable about doing it. We have a real diverse class, a lot of different people. There's a junior high principal and a ferry worker and some all sorts of different things in the class. And I think aviation in itself is something that's fun. It's something that people enjoy doing. It gives them a chance to do something with their hands and to accomplish something that's just enjoyable to do.
Learning the operations of the controls is an important part of the process.
This is the control yoke, and it's the control for bringing the nose up or down. And this controls your ailerons, which enables you to turn the plane left or right. And these pedals down on the floor are connected to the rudder, which enables you to bring the nose around in a turn. And then you would have the instruments here. This is your airspeed indicator, which is calibrated in knots of airspeed or miles per hour. And this is your attitude indicator, which, without using outside references, would enable you to tell if your wings were level and if you were climbing or descending. This is your altimeter, which tells you how high you are above mean sea level. And this is a VOR head, which works with your navigational radio. This is your vertical speed indicator, which just gives you the initial rate you're moving up or down. And this is your directional gyro, which, along with your magnetic compass, helps determine which direction you're heading. And this is your turn coordinator, which just lets you see if your turns are coordinated and if you are in a left or right turn.
For those wanting to obtain a pilot's license, there are certain requirements. Although formal ground school is not required, the FAA does test prospective pilots on the information these classes teach. 35 to 40 hours of flight time is also required, and 20 of those must be solo. In addition, there's both a physical and a verbal exam. Those unfamiliar with this windswept muskeg 7 miles southwest of the Simpson village of Metlakatla would be surprised to discover a 7,500-foot abandoned runway amid the wilderness of Annette Island. Adjacent to the runway is a control tower that no longer guides passenger planes to safe landings, and there's an abandoned hangar where Coast Guard mechanics kept helicopters ready for search and rescue missions. Now the muskeg is slowly reclaiming what it once owned. In 1940, Europe was at war. Japan was making military advances in the Pacific, and the United States was building its defenses. To protect Alaska, the Army built this airfield on Annette Island. In August 1940, the 28th Army Corps of Engineers left San Francisco aboard the Leonard Wood with supplies to start the construction of the runways. 1 week later, the men were in Ketchikan, ready to transport the supplies to Annette Island, 12 air miles to the south. Roads were built. Rocks quarried on the island were transported to the runway site. In November of 1941, 4 months before the completion of either of the 2 runways, the first plane, a B-18, landed on a net. The foul weather which caused problems for the Corps of Engineers had also made things difficult for the pilot. By August of 1942, the 55-foot control tower was completed and work was started on the hangar. Gun emplacements were built at Point Davidson to protect the airfield. The U.S. Army used the Annette Airfield to service and fuel cargo transport planes carrying men and supplies to defend the Aleutians against the Japanese. The defense of the airfield and much of southeast Alaska was taken on by the Royal Canadian Air Force. Due to its strategic proximity to Prince Rupert, the Canadians stationed 2 fighter squadrons and 2 bomber reconnaissance squadrons on the island during the war. The rainy weather that made living in tents on the Muskeg unpleasant also caused casualties for the men and planes stationed on the island. While Annette was far from the worst of the Pacific War theater, the men did not always find time to relax. Japanese submarines were seen in the waters off the coast of southeast Alaska. In July of 1942, the pilot of a Canadian bowling broke spotted, attacked, and damaged a Japanese sub 20 miles off the coast of Prince of Wales Island. 2 Coast Guard cutters, the McLean and this ship, the YP-251, formerly a converted halibut boat called the Foremost, were sent to investigate. The Coast Guard narrowly escaped a torpedo, ran over the periscope, and dropped depth charges, probably destroying the enemy submarine. By August of 1943, the Canadians were able to reduce their forces in southeast Alaska and move the bomber squadron to Vancouver and the fighters to Terrace, BC. This Ventura reconnaissance bomber was the last Canadian plane to leave Annette. In 1947, the Army transferred control of the airfield to the Civil Aeronautics Administration and the community of Metlakatla. The field became Ketchikan's official airport. Pan American Airways resumed normal passenger service to southeast Alaska. During the war, their planes had been used by the Army, and civilians could only fly on a space-available basis. In 1955, Pacific Northern Airlines joined Pan Am in offering scheduled flights from Seattle to Annette, and a passenger terminal was built. In 1962, Pacific Northern inaugurated the first regularly scheduled jet service from Seattle to Southeast with 3 Boeing 720s. Passengers flying to the gateway city had to change planes at Annette. It came as a shock to all but seasoned Southeast passengers to depart the comforts of the older DC-4s and 6s and the newer Boeing jets to board the smaller Grumman Gooses and PBYs that took them on to the Ketchikan waterfront. The airport on Gravina Island was completed in August 1973 and transformed the 12-mile flight from Annette to Ketchikan into less than a 12-minute ferry ride. The commercial airlines then abandoned Annette for the newly completed Ketchikan Airport, and soon the smaller air taxis would also leave Annette. All that remained was the Coast Guard Air Station. The Coast Guard Air Station at Annette Island began flight operations in 1944 with a local area familiarization flight in a Grumman JRF-5 Goose. The size of the detachment was 2 officers and 6 enlisted crew members. 2 years later, a second Grumman and additional crew increased the size of the air station. In 1952, the larger Grumman Albatross began replacing the older Goose as the air station's workhorse. By 1973, however, the Albatross will become extinct at the air station. Helicopters were proving to be more adaptable to the Coast Guard mission in southeast Alaska. Ownership of the hangar that now serviced search and rescue aircraft instead of fighters was transferred to the Coast Guard in 1956. The air station was growing in equipment and flight crews. Housing for 73 families was constructed at nearby Tamgus Harbor in 1965. In the mid-60s, 3 Sikorsky HH-52 helicopters were added to the station's aircraft complement. In July 1972, the helicopters were replaced with newer and larger HH-3Fs, and soon the helicopter became the only aircraft in use at the station. Just as the Ketchikan Airport ended Annette's commercial passenger service, it also signaled the end of the Coast Guard Air Station. It would be more economical to perform search and rescue missions from a more central location in southeast. This central location would also aid in enforcing the 200-mile coastal zone management area. Sitka was chosen as the site that would best serve these needs, and in 1977, the air station, its 110 crewmen, and 80 families left the airfield at Annette to the advancing Muskeg.
Not everyone can be the captain of an airline, even if they do still want to fly a plane. A popular compromise might be to take up flying on a smaller scale.
These are members of the Gastineau Aeromodellers Society. Their idea of a good time is to build and fly radio-controlled model aircraft.
It's exciting. Look at. I fly big airplanes too, but this is a lot more exciting. I can do aerobatics and keep my feet on the ground, you know.
Must be more fun to watch it from the outside instead of just being on the inside, right?
Well, you know, you don't get sick, do the loops and that type of thing. Don't care if the wings fall off. Here's another aspect of the sport. You can have any airplane you want. You know, if you want a P-51 or if you want a biplane, you know, you can't just afford one, a big one, eh? But here you can build anything you want.
Building and flying the plane of your dreams is great fun, and it's proper safety precautions that keep it that way.
We have instructors that instruct the new people, and I would say equipment checks and these kinds of things to maintain a degree of safety.
At a group fun fly like this, an additional safety factor is required, the use of a frequency board. The flyers use this board to alert each other as to which radio frequencies are presently in use. Here's how it works. You go to the board and check to see if the clip for your transmitter's frequency is there. If it is, you take the clip and clip it to your antenna. If it's not there, you know that some other flyer is on that frequency at the moment, and you must wait till that flyer is back on the ground and has returned the clip to the board. This way, the flyers know they control their own plane.
On your right stick, you have elevator. See how it moves up and down? So it's just like sitting in the airplane. And the rudder is on the same stick. And this is going to be the throttle. It, you know, gives your engine speed.
Sounds simple, doesn't it? Not so. It takes as many hours to become a good pilot of model aircraft as the real McCoy. First, there's ground school. No, this isn't actually part of the training. These experienced flyers are enjoying a session of precision very low altitude flying, or PVLAF. Look at him. All the woes of the world on his shoulders. And if the placid world of fixed-wing aircraft becomes too sedate for you, well, maybe a baby Huey would liven things up.
How is flying a model helicopter different than flying a model airplane?
About 100 times harder. He's one of the few people in the state that can fly one that well, or fly one at all. There's just a handful of guys, but they're very, very difficult, much more so than an airplane.
Why?
An airplane is self-stabilizing going through the air. If you trim it out, it'll fly itself, but these are very, very unstable. They have nothing to stabilize them, no movement through the air. So when you, especially in a hover, transitioning from a hover forward just like you did, there's torque is changing and lift is changing and everything is changing, so it's very difficult to transition. We've had guys that have tried for well over a year and just could barely get him off the ground.
He seems really to be in control of it.
He is, very much so. He's a very smooth pilot and does a really good job with it, better than anybody I've seen. There are guys down south that can, believe it or not, they can hover those inverted upside down, which is really incredible.
That was quite a display. How long have you been doing that?
Oh, about a year now. I started out in Bethel. I didn't have anything else to do out there, so I decided I'd either learn or crash a lot, and I've done both.
Well, I guess that gets you good at repair.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, but yeah, I have had a lot of repairs. But I've finally got to the point now where usually I don't crash. I can get a couple flights in without ending up with bits and pieces.
Was this wind bothering you any?
No, not really. The wind is a lot easier to handle with the helicopter than it is the airplanes, because they have some direct lift there with the collective. So when you get a gust of wind, you can make an immediate response to handle it. So it's a lot easier really to fly than I find the helicopter in the wind than the winged airplanes.
Do you fly the big ones too?
No, I have never been in one. I just decided to give it a whirl, as they say.
In the spring and summer and fall, they fly on wheels. In the winter, they fly on skis. And whenever the lake's not frozen,
Feeling bored? He's got it. You got it. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's a good one.
Hey, you got it all.
the spills, dings, busted props, and occasional total disasters, known in the trade as re-kitting your airplane, they don't faze these folks. It comes with the territory. There are plenty of rainy days ahead to spend putting a wing back together, or picking pine needles out of your radio compartment, or working on that new one you've been itching to fly.
People talk about the right stuff. I'm not sure what that means, but whatever it is, these cats have it.
A female Alaska Airlines captain, one of only 24 women captains flying on U.S. airlines. Historic Annette Airfield and the sport of model airplaning, just 3 more of the people, places, and activities that make up life in rain country. That's our program for tonight. We'll be back again next week with another installment. Join us then. I'm Scott Foster. Have a good day.